Peace be with you. Dear friends, welcome to Living Flame Daily Gospel Reflections for Friday in the fifth week in the Ordinary Time. Gospel according to Mark chapter 7, verses 31 to 37. Dear friends, in our text today, we find Jesus on a journey, making his way from the Gentile cities of Tyre and Sidon to the Sea of Galilee. He had taken a route that brought him through the region of Decapolis on the east side of Galilee. This is the same region where Jesus healed the maniac who dwelt among the tombs. As we follow his steps that day, we no longer find a people who don't want him among them, but rather those who are thankful he has returned. Dear friend, aren't you glad Jesus came by your way more than once or multiple times? As he made his way through Decapolis, the people began to gather around him. We can just imagine, whenever a guest comes who has brought us peace, solace, joy, and happiness, we always long for his return. I can imagine the noise that must have filled the air when Jesus came back. Most probably people shouted, "He is back! The one who touched the maniac is back! Bring those who need a touch unto him." It is in this setting that our text unfolds. Jesus touches a man who is deaf and unable to speak. Today would be much different than the previous visit. On this day, rather than desiring Jesus to leave, the people make a profound statement. He has done all things well. Many don't believe, but those who have experienced his touch declare that Jesus has done all things well. Let's look at the details of this miraculous encounter as we consider doing all things well. First, in verse 32 of today's gospel passage, we find there was a turmoil of the man. This one verse reveals how much the man who came to Jesus that day was troubled. There is a picture of all of us in this man. He had to depend on someone else, and they bring unto him who was deaf. He had an impediment in his speech. We find those who knew the man brought him to Jesus. He may have been able to see the commotion, but he had no idea what was going on. This man was in a position where he depended on others for his needs. That is why that each of us are dependent on others, and especially on God. There are those around us today who do not fully understand what they need. They may know something is missing in their lives, but they are unable to find it for themselves. There are lost people, maybe even some of our own children, who are depending on others to point them to Jesus. We all know someone who is lacking but can't seem to get there themselves. What will you do to get them to Jesus? He alone is what they need. Somebody needs to point them to the Savior so they too can be saved. This man was deaf. He could not hear. He also had a speech impediment. He was unable to speak. Can you imagine the despair he felt? He was unable to hear what was going on around him. He found it difficult to communicate. No doubt his life was filled with days of loneliness and despair. I'm sure he longed to be able to hear and communicate. He longed to live life without the burden of this condition. Dear friends, when we look at this gospel passage, Jesus taking this man out of the crowd and put his fingers into his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, Jesus sighed and said to the man, "Ephphatha," that is, be opened. And immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. Dear friends, looking at this gospel passage, we are invited today, first of all, to depend on God. Secondly, we need to bring someone who wants God to the feet of Jesus. Thirdly, we have all obligation to appreciate what good is done around us. As Jesus did everything well, we too have the obligation to do all things well. In our daily lives, the best thing that we can do, dear friends, is to follow Christ and to follow His invitation to His kingdom. God bless you.